Welcome to Work Comp Talk Podcast, a podcast that educates all injured workers here in California. Joining me today is Bilal Kassem. My name is Carmen, your host for today's podcast. If you have not yet subscribed to our channel, make sure you do so now. Hit the notification bell as well so you can get notified every time we dump new content. This podcast is sponsored by Pacific Workers, the lawyers for injured workers. If you've been injured at work, make sure you give those folks a call and they can take care of anything regarding your injury at work. Welcome, Bilal.
Welcome.
Welcome back to another episode. And today's episode is exciting because we're going to be talking about money, which I think is one of the hottest topics in anyone's life. Who doesn't want to know about money? In this scenario, we're going to be specifically talking about money that gets added to a case. How do they come up with amounts? How do they come up with settlements and everything regarding money? So where do you want to begin?
Why does workers' comp not pay Jack?
Okay.
I don't know.
That's like the number two
That's
question.
probably the biggest question I get, but I think it's important to understand how workers' comp cases are valued generally.
That's a great beginning. How are they valued? How does someone put a monetary value on an injury?
So, kind of a history about this, and we just did another video about this with the history of workers' comp. Basically, way back in the day, employees traded the right to sue their employers in civil court for workers' comp, and the idea was that you got to trade not having to prove fault for essentially a no-fault benefits delivery system. And so the idea was to reduce the amount of damages that employers could potentially have to pay out, but also make it a system where it's more convenient to the employee to recover medical care and benefits for lost wages and such because of injuries that happened on the job. So because of that, the damages were really set by statute. You got things like permanent disability, temporary disability, you got free medical care, and these would all serve in lieu of damages that you would see in negligence case, like in civil court, which are things like pain and suffering, future lost earnings and things like that.
You made me cry. I'm going to sue you and I want money for my tears that I shed.
Yeah, that among other things, or the fact that, I'm in pain all the time and I can't do the things I love anymore and things like that. And so really the damages were limited because of that. And limiting those damages, the legislature created an architecture for essentially what benefits you're entitled to and how those benefits are calculated.
Gotcha.
So,
in a sense, it almost makes sense because if you were to still have to take this, let's just say I'm taking my boss to a civil case, I really have to work hard to even prove my case. And there is no guarantee that I might be winning this case. I might lose everything and get nothing because I don't have that proof, or it's just going to make it that much harder for me to even get anything in regards to my injury.
Yeah, if you had to hire a lawyer and every time you got injured at work, you had to prove negligence or fault on the part of the employer. I mean, there's a lot of cases where it's easy, especially what we see in the office, but there's also a lot of cases where genuine accidents happen.
Right.
And nobody was particularly at fault.
Right.
And in those accidents, if you didn't have a benefit system there to cover you without fault being involved, you may be really out of luck.
Yeah, that would suck. Okay, so in a sense, it was a good thing that this happened.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, though, like all things that insurance is involved in, it becomes more so about cutting costs than delivering benefits, right? You have for-profit business, which is the insurance companies, involved in what's supposed to be a no-fault benefit delivery system. And delivery system is important because it's there supposed to be for the benefit of the injured worker. It's not supposed to be something that is litigious where people are fighting about saving costs and cutting costs over time.
Right. Well, that kind of sucks. There's always got to be some type of party getting involved that benefits only for profit. In this case, so back in the days, they gave up the right to sue your boss when you get injured because you're supposed to get taken care of through this new law that we call, or this new system we call workers' comp. How does then the monetization for an injury come into play? We know that permanent disability has certain ratings. Can you explain those ratings and how this comes into play?
Sure. So there's two different, I guess, terms that are used commonly for the settlement amount. And that's usually used interchangeably, where someone says they have a whole person impairment rating or permanent disability rating. And it's important to understand the distinction that a whole person impairment rating is a rating percentage that a doctor gives you based on either a diagnosis or a particular limited amount of function that you have for a particular body part. That number, that percentage, then gets adjusted by various factors. There's one that's called a diminished future earning capacity adjuster. There's an occupational variant, and then your age obviously impacts that what permanent disability rating is. And so you take a rating that a doctor gives, a whole person impairment rating, and that can be adjusted up or down based on those things. So for example, if you are a construction worker that's 22 years old, your rating might adjust up depending on the body part based on the fact that you're a construction worker. So you have a pretty physical job, but then it may adjust down again because you're so young that there's a chance that you would be able to significantly rehabilitate, maybe not into that job, but another job because you're more young and malleable. Versus, if you're, let's say, a 55-year-old law enforcement officer, you have an extremely physical job. You're 55, so a chance of you going back and re-educating or rehabilitating in the workforce is pretty slim, to the significance you would need to support yourself or your family. And so your impairment rating would be adjusted probably significantly up.
Yeah.
And then when you're thinking about the body part, that matters too. An office worker who loses their leg may not be as impacted as a janitor or a construction worker or a plumber, whatever.
Or a delivery driver.
Or a delivery driver, right?
Uses,
when you're looking at the body part, the age, and the type of job they're in, the rating that the doctor gives gets adjusted up or down based on those factors. And then that final percentage is what's used to calculate the value of your permanent disability.
Interesting. And I'm so glad that you said this, because there's so many components that come into play when it comes to creating this type of rating and finalizing what that value is going to be. What is it like for someone who decides to not even hire an attorney? How do they know that these numbers are coming in? Who does the math? How does this fall for someone who's not represented?
So if you're reading a medical report, you'll see the numbers in there to some extent. The doctors are required to provide whole person impairment ratings. So you'll see terms like MMI and WPI, and those are all part of it. But the rating string that you would use to calculate the final percentage of permanent disability is something that you'd find in the 2005 Permanent Disability Rating Schedule, which was something that was obviously created in 2005. And it's something that's not found anywhere in a medical report. You'd have to understand what it is and how to use it and apply it to the particular ratings.
So it's like a special formula that you have to know how to maneuver to kind of make it work for you.
Yes.
If you don't do anything about it, let's just say you just kind of roll with the punches, whatever the doctor gives you, then your claim adjuster does all these calculations. You don't even know if they're giving you the right calculations and you're accepting what they're giving you.
Yes, and even the medical report itself. The doctors use something called the AMA Guides for Rating Permanent Disability. And it's this fat green book that basically outlines the ways that the doctors can give you whole person impairment based on certain diagnoses, lack of function like range of motion or inability to walk without use of a cane and things like that. And so if you were going to even try to determine whether or not the doctor is giving you a fair whole person impairment rating, you would need to understand which section of the guides they're applying, what body parts, which tables, and whether or not the percentage is accurate for all that stuff. So,
do they ever fuck it up?
All the time. All the time. Because the doctors have to learn this stuff too.
Yeah.
They're not just winging it. This is all stuff that's very much set in stone. And so, a doctor may give you a whole person impairment rating that is clearly inadequate. An example of this we see all the time is they call it a diagnosis-based estimate or a diagnosis estimate for your lumbar spine. You might have radiculopathy, which is numbness and tingling in your legs because you have a nerve issue in your spine. And that's usually confirmed by an EMG study. And so the doctor may say that you're only a category 1, not category 2, or a category 2 and not category 3 because they say, oh, well, there's no confirmed EMG. Even though you may have had an EMG done and you may know or you may not know if you're not experienced that having that positive EMG puts you in a higher category automatically. And that would be ammunition to go and take the doctor's cross-examination or ask the doctor for a supplemental report to address that mistake. And that's literally thousands of dollars difference for you.
Wow.
Just in permanent disability. So if you've never done it before, you're not going to know.
Yeah, makes total sense. So this is something you definitely don't want to take lightly if you are not represented and you're at the point where you're getting a rating. I'd be scared if I was not represented, especially if I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't studied that part of the law. Why would I want to even jeopardize that type of benefit? Because at the end of the day, this money isn't just for you to like, haha, here you go. You got hurt. Here's some money. It's money that's going to be utilized essentially for your health, for your treatment, for things that you're going to need in the future. And I'd be shit out of luck if I'd be stuck with zero to no money and having to deal with the pain and having to pay the hospital. That's just not something you want to do on your own. What else is monetized in a workers' comp case?
So there's temporary disability, which is different than permanent disability. Temporary disability is designed to compensate you for your lost wages while you're recovering from the injury and improving. And so that's supposed to be a wage replacement. You also have what's called a supplemental job displacement benefit, which is up to $6,000 in job retraining or education if you're displaced from your job or your normal duties. If you have a finding of permanent disability, that would make you legally entitled to that. And that's designed to help you kind of get back on your feet.
Kind of like restudy something, get a certificate of something,
you know what,
some
working
sort.
in automotive is not your thing anymore. So, here, go take some college courses and learn accounting or finance or something else, There's also what's called the return to work supplement, which is California funded benefits, $5,000 for you.
Additional to the $6,000.
Yeah, in addition. And that's supposed to help supplement that if you lose your job, to help re-educate you. That's a paid benefit from the state, not the insurance company. And then there's the medical care, which is sometimes monetized because you can elect to settle out the value of your medical care instead of having the insurance company provide it on an ongoing basis.
Interesting. There's a lot of money involved here, and there's a lot of components that I can see how someone who is their first time getting injured, navigating the system alone, can fuck shit up for themselves, honestly.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it easy to be a target to get taken advantage of.
So how then, with all of this that we are learning about monetizing certain parts of a workers' comp case, how is it then that the claims adjuster, which is the person that represents or works for the insurance company that is supposed to take care of you, how is it that this person then comes and offers you a settlement, depending on what these amounts have been thrown at you or have been provided by the doctor? How do they even come up with the settlement?
So, for-profit business, insurance companies want to save money. So obviously you can assume that any offer that the insurance company is giving you is motivated by the fact that that is less than what their cost actually is going to be long-term. Because why pay you their worst case scenario up front? So you can just assume that anytime they offer you a settlement, there's some calculation involved that's designed to reduce costs, and that's probably the primary basis for what they're offering. There's also the idea that they want closed files. They don't want to get stuck allocating administration costs to a file that's going to stay open forever because they have their overhead. They have to pay their own employees healthcare and benefits and sick time and this and that. So, insurance companies are all about cost savings. They want to take more in premiums than they pay out in claims. That way they're profitable for their shareholders. And so that's a primary motivation for settlement for a lot of insurance companies, is to close the books, close them fast at a low cost. But when you're looking at the value, they have experts. They have, actuarial scientists and stuff on staff, and they look at risk, is what they call it, to say, well, hey, if we keep this over this long, or this type of claim it is, what is that going to be our cost long term? And so they'll look at what they've spent on the claim so far. They'll look at what the permanent disability might be given the medical conditions. They'll look at your medical treatment history for the claim itself to say, hey, this person's cost us, $500,000 already. It's only been 1 year. What's a lifetime of this going to cost us? And they'll usually come up with some figure that represents a discount to what their cost will be, but also maybe seems palatable to you. And oftentimes they'll throw out numbers that don't make any sense just because they say, hey, you know what, maybe this person will take it.
Yeah. So
maybe your case is worth $100,000 and they just throw out an offer for $25,000 or $10,000. For a lot of people, that's a lot of money. And so they're going to say, oh, well, I'm going to jump at this because it's great. Maybe it's not going to be available later.
Yeah.
So,
and even that, and there's the case where the person hasn't been receiving money. They can't make ends meet. They're not working. So having a check, $25,000, is going to kind of ease those pains for the moment, but you're not thinking long term. And some people probably do go for that bait.
Yeah, but if you're in that situation, like, what do you do? Because you have rent, you have children, you have to feed, you have to pay for gas, you have bills, you have debts, and you have a multi-billion-dollar insurance company on the other side fighting you. They can stay solvent longer than you can. And I think a lot of people's basic family needs and basic care needs take precedent over staying in the fight long enough to really recoup the value of what they should be entitled to.
But that's not a good thing.
No, but there's the reality of it, I think, and unfortunately it's a slow system, and unfortunately I think a lot of people do get put in a position where they can't fight it out.
Right.
But we also have clients, and I've seen it in other cases where people are willing to stay in the fight. They have potentially a long-term disability policy, or they're able to draw from state disability, or they have a spouse that's working that can float their monthly expenses,
right,
so that they have the patience and ability to do what's needed to really ensure that long-term they are getting everything they possibly could.
So from the initial $25,000 settlement that someone may have received, but yet they decided, you know what, I'm in it for the fight and I want to get compensated for what I deserve. What have been some of those like different amounts and flips that you've seen helping injured workers?
I've got a current case. The offer was $0. The last offer that they made was over $500,000. There's been cases clearly where it's gone from, $0 or $5,000 or $10,000 to, 150, 200 plus easily. It's a lot of those cases. Other cases I've seen, one in particular was 40. We settled it for 180. So I'd say more often than not, probably the majority of the time, clients come to us with either a denied case or a lowball settlement offer. And usually we blow those out of the water by a huge margin for the clients.
So, note to self, don't ever settle on the first offer.
No, and oftentimes it's a gauge, right? It's like,
yeah,
what's your temperature? How much are you willing to fight, and how greedy do they think you are that you'll take some low amount just to walk away quickly? And it's all based on science, and they keep a lot of data, insurance companies, so they can look and see how much they pay on average for X type of claims and stuff. And I think the adjusters are motivated to get things done. And they do have a certain level, they call it desk authority or field authority for a lot of adjusters, where at a base level they have some limit of settlement authority where they don't have to talk to their boss, and it goes up to a certain amount. So
gotcha.
That number could be like $25,000 or $50,000. And so you'll see adjusters usually throwing out numbers like that range because they don't have to ask anyone for that. That's just money they have as authority within their position. When you start getting into the bigger amounts, then that typically gets more higher up attention, and those amounts need to be approved. They need to work up the value and ask for permission, things like that, and go and justify why they're going to offer that amount. So typically you'll see that low range thrown around a lot just because that's what the adjuster has within their power alone.
That's insane. I mean, I'm super glad that we're talking about this, because how else would an injured worker even know this information if it's not being provided out there? And like you said, yes, there may be a green fat book somewhere out there, and it's not Green Eggs and Hams by Dr. Seuss, but the only way you can figure this shit out is by sitting down with an attorney, asking these questions. And a lot of people are afraid. Attorneys are not going to bite you. Attorneys do free consultations. If they are trying to charge you, then that's not okay. Usually, most part, consultations are free when it comes to a workers' comp claim. So there's just no reason for you not to really arm yourself with the necessary tools for you to kind of, fend for yourself if that's the route you're trying to take.
Yeah, I think if you go to an attorney, they're not going to bite, like you said. They'll give you a pretty decent assessment. Most of the time, to be 100% candid, we can't tell you what your case is worth. We can't tell you all the information that you probably want to know up front. That's just not how workers' comp works.
Yeah.
But we can give you a good idea just looking at what's happened so far to tell you, hey, you're getting screwed, or, hey, look, they've actually been doing pretty good for you. And,
right.
Your doctor's great. They've been paying your benefits at the right rate and stuff like that. So, and of course, that's no charge.
Interesting. So there you have it. This is all the types of, I guess, monetary you can add to a work injury if you've been involved in an injury at work. For even the minimalist thing that you think, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like Bilal said, it's not necessarily the settlement you're going to get after the fact. It's more so how are your benefits coming through while you're getting better from your injury, while you're stuck at home. You are supposed to get some sort of benefits when it comes to money. And of course, if they come with you and try to settle you for X amount of money, there's just so many components that fall into it. Is there anything else that gets added with money?
Yeah, sometimes people have out-of-pocket medical expenses. So if a case was denied and you had to pay through your own insurance to get medical care, you might have some medical bills. Or in the case of the insurance company not doing what they're supposed to do, you might have had to go to your doctor even on an admitted case to get something done.
Yeah.
So you might need reimbursement for that.
Prescriptions
or even, medical procedures and stuff. We also see medical mileage where people are entitled to mileage reimbursement for their traveling to and from medical appointments, pharmacies, physical therapy, stuff like that. That usually gets thrown in as well. And then, of course, there's penalties and sanctions. Oftentimes we get, huge amounts of money added onto cases just because we caught the insurance company doing something we weren't supposed to do.
Ooh. Okay, that's going to be another conversation for another topic. Penalties and sanctions against the insurance companies because they're doing something wrong. Sounds interesting. Make sure you stay locked into our YouTube channel. Follow us on TikTok as well. We're everywhere on social media. Stay up to date on those notifications so you get notified every time we upload a new episode. Thank you so much for diving into this conversation with me, Bilal. I think we learned a lot, and if I can take anything from this is never settle on your first offer.
Yep.
Thank you. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.